Welcome back to the JoinTheTrades.com interview series where we talk to tradespeople and learn more about successful career paths straight from the source. Today, my guest is Erik Salmon, a commercial dive medic with 3 years in the trade. Erik, tell us how you got started.
Well, thank you first of all for having me on here. Well, the way I got started, I was in the military, I was in the Army, and I was looking at getting off of active duty and transitioning into civilian life. So I had a family at the time, and I didn't have time to sit in like a 4-year university, that kind of thing. I had to make some money fairly quickly. So I started looking through the VA career book and checking things out, and I came across a commercial dive school that happened to be in a location where I'd actually grown up out here in California. And I'd never dove before. I'd actually, a buddy of mine, when we were stationed in Germany, had gone through scuba diving, and I went with him a couple times to just go check out his class. It seemed kind of interesting, and so when I looked at that, and it was like 50-week course, and I was like, okay, that is going to be something that I could, get in and get out. Coming from the military, you get, X amount of months for unemployment, so I had it all planned out, and so yeah, I went through their program. I had to get scuba certified prior to getting to the open water tanks. So we had so many weeks of classroom time and getting the academics, and then we had the hands-on where we start getting used to the equipment, start learning how to use the equipment, how to be safe underwater, do things in the tank that I just never thought I would do. Um, one thing that just really like nailed it for me, like I knew this was what I wanted to do. We do this exercise where two divers get in the water. One diver is completely equipped and out with helmet and everything all the way down, and the other diver just gets in with a wetsuit. And you go down into this tank that's probably about 23 foot of water, and you exchange out the equipment from one diver to the other. And
Wow.
so even though there seems like there's only air source in the helmet, there's actually this other hose that's called a pneumophonometer that they shoot air down, and when the water pressure pushes back up on that air, it sends it to a dial that says, okay, this much pressure, so it's this much depth. And you can actually turn that on, and they taught us how to breathe underwater on just bubbles. And that was the coolest thing I'd ever done. And so I exchanged out that equipment. We got out. We were like, yeah, that was freaking awesome. So,
Wow. That's
yeah.
funny that you mentioned that. I mean, not remotely near the level, obviously, that you were at there, but I did get certified at one
Okay.
point, and did get the idea of what it's like to sip on the bubbles just to
Right.
get some oxygen.
Right.
But what you did was a whole different level.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're going down there, and you're under some depth, even in those tanks. It's not just you don't want, and you don't want to hold your breath going up, as you know, because you don't want to get injured. But yeah, that was one of the coolest things I'd done, and that kind of solidified it for me. Up until that point, I was still kind of, I wonder if I'm going to do any good at this. I wonder if this is something I'm going to enjoy. And so I went through the scuba diving certification, and that gave me some idea. And there's some stuff that translated over, but it just kind of gets you in that frame of mind of what it's like to breathe underwater and so on and so forth. And so yeah, that was a cool experience. It was a great year that I had at dive school.
Yeah, no doubt. How deep are you talking at this point?
Well, that was just in the tank. They have these tanks outside of a couple buildings, and they fill it up with water. Matter of fact, it was interesting as a school I went to. They actually filmed a movie there. I'm trying to remember the name of it, where the guy um, was breathing pure oxygen. The liquid oxygen. I'm trying to remember the name of the movie. I'm
The
sorry.
Abyss. Was it The Abyss?
Yeah, the abyss. They filmed that in
Right.
that tank. It was interesting. So it's not that big of a tank, but it's big enough for you're down at least 20 feet, and so you're going, okay, that's It's like it was pretty cool. So
Yeah, that's incredibly cool. Wow. And yeah, I remember the Abyss, so
yeah.
that's neat. So where'd you go for there? So you got through that 50-week period, right? You get certified. What kind of category are you in at that point? What are you considered?
So at that point, you're just if you were going in the industry, they wouldn't even classify you as a diver. And this is where it kind of gets a little tough for some people, because it is a trade. You do have to kind of earn your stripes, so to speak. You got to go in and show that you've got the work ethic, and you may not be treated, very nicely at times, and so it can be a little rough for somebody. So if you don't have a thick skin, it's probably not something that you're going to want to, get into, because they really push, because they want to know that if you're going down to depth, they can't supervise you. They got to know that you're going to down there and you're going to get to work and you're going to do your job, And so they really push you and see what your work ethic is and see what your mindset. Because you got to really have a good mindset. You have to be in great physical shape. When I went to school, I was probably one of the older people there. I was only 24, but most of these guys are coming out of high school, and I'd already spent, almost 6 years in the military. And so I was in good shape, because I was in combat arms. But it, it's a different world when you get into diving all together. So a lot of the jobs are in the Gulf of Mexico. Um,
Hmm.
and so you have to travel down there and you have to go knocking on doors, and hopefully someone gives you a chance, and sometimes you might bunk there as well. They might have a yard there where you can bunk there, because a lot of guys coming in from out of state, they're not staying in hotels and stuff, and they might hire like 10 guys, knowing that 10 guys aren't going to stay on. And they might give them
Ah,
grunt work to, weed whack a yard that's concrete, for like 2, 3 weeks. And, sometimes guys just don't have that wherewithal to stick to it and go, okay, I'm paying my dues. I'm showing them that they can give me anything and I don't care. I'm just going to do it. You know, then at some
so
point, they're going to say, grab your bags, you're going offshore.
okay,
And that's when the real work starts.
okay. So your military background probably I assume helped you as far as like the stick to itiveness, right? Like
Right, right,
I can push through this.
right. Now, that's the typical route, and I didn't do the typical route.
Okay.
I actually went inland diving. I found an inland company in Illinois, and it took me a few weeks to get in because they didn't. It's like construction, it's job to job, and when they need people, then they'll reach out. So I was able to get on with them after a couple of weeks. And one of the great things about that first experience is I went down to the company was in Illinois. We went down to Missouri and we were working on a casino barge complex, and the Missouri River had flooded, and they built this casino bridge barge complex over a natural sandbar, and they dug all that out, to build this complex. But when it flooded, that all kind of suited back up with all the sand and stuff, and logs and debris. And the Coast Guard still regulates even in inland waters. And had the complex actually settled down on top of that, they would have had to pull the complex out for inspection of integrity. So they don't want to do that. They were making $1 million a day. They don't want to pull that out and lose money, right? So
Right,
you're going to
sure.
pull in some divers. And so literally, they went from where you could kind of stick your hand right there at the top of the barge and the bottom of the sand. You could like stick your hand and feel both, down to about 27 foot of water. And the way they did that is you had this like 4-inch hose that had a screen on it to keep debris out of. And basically, you're just sucking the sand out and shipping it back out into the main uh, area of the river, where they would then dredge it out and move it so it doesn't become a hazard in that water. We were on that job for, I want to say, just over 3 months, and because I hadn't dove yet, no experience diving, I was just what we call choking hose. You're a tender, and I did that for like 3 weeks, and then they finally said, "Okay, why don't you? Let's see what we see your work ethic. Let's see what you do underwater." Offshore, that typically takes 2 to 4 years.
Okay.
So that was one lucky break I had, and so I did that, um, and my dive time. And so when you're doing commercial diving, you're paid in different tiers. So you're paid a rate for your deck work, so topside work, and then you're paid like a depth pay, and then you're paid danger pay on top of that if you can't reach the surface directly.
Okay. Interesting.
So even though, yeah, it's dangerous, you think you get danger pay. No, it's if you're in more extreme danger, so to speak, right? So, and that's how that works. And so you may make at the time, and this was in the late '90s when I was in the industry, I was doing about $15 an hour, which was really good money back then.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. I remember.
Yeah, and so and we were working 12-hour days, 7 days a week. So anything over eight, is time and a half, and then on Sundays everything was double time.
Yeah.
So I was clearing on that job probably about 2,000 a week on that
Right.
job, and I made enough money to pay off my student loan on that job.
Excellent.
So, and commercial dive school at the time for me was about 15 grand. So
Okay. And
now
do
I
you know
want
what
to
the
say,
rates may be?
what's that?
I was going to ask if you know what the rates may be
Yeah,
currently.
it depends on the school. So you can go to like a tender school where you learn just to choke hose for like 8 weeks. You might spend about 8 grand on that, or you can go to a longer length school, 16 weeks to a year, um, and you're going to spend, maybe about 25 to 30,000 on that school. Um,
Okay.
but if you think about college, that's what, a semester?
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
of pay. So, big difference.
Oh,
When you
for
come,
sure.
yeah, when you come out, you're not going to make a lot of money, but you're going to work your way up, and you're going to start making more money as you move up and gain more skills. And it's on you if you want to learn those skills. I got a premium because I was medically trained.
Okay.
So I got a little bit extra money. Some guys went into inspection diving, or they went into welding. So there was three different specialties at our school.
Okay. So specifically, that helped you out. Now, did you get that medic training in school, or did you get that in the military beforehand?
So obviously I had some medical training when I was from active duty because I was in combat arms. And that's how I thought, okay, I enjoyed doing it in the military. I'll probably enjoy doing, that kind of thing in civilian life. And so the course I went through was a basic EMT course that I got certified as an EMT, and then they had what they called the advanced dive medicine course, where you learned advanced things such as suturing and where you're learning how to run the hyperbaric chamber and things like that. There's things you can do as a commercial diver medic offshore under doctor's orders that you could never do as a basic EMT. You're almost like a paramedic when you're out offshore, where a basic EMT, you would have to go through an additional 6 months of training, and a large part of that is pharmaceutical training as well. So, um, but yeah, and matter of fact, when I was going through dive school, once my unemployment ran out, I was able to go and get a job as an EMT while I was going to school. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Okay. So you have the medic aspect thrown in there, which is giving you a little bit more pay and obviously more responsibilities. How often did you have to use that? Because at first, like you said, you were pulling hose. Is that correct?
yeah, choking hose.
Choking hose. Excuse
Yeah,
me.
no, it's okay.
And
Um,
then from then on, after choking hose, then the next responsibility that you ended up with was what?
So then they allowed me to go under to actually do diving and go under there and start sucking that sand out. And they monitor how you're working by how much stuff's coming out the other end because it's shooting up into the air so they can see what debris is coming out. So if the water's
Okay.
clear, they know you're not working. you know. So they're like, "Hey, it's getting a little light." You're like, "Well, I'm just adjusting something or whatever." And keep in mind this is black water diving. You can't see anything.
Right.
Everything you're working with, you first kind of visualize when you're up topside, and you kind of get used to what the tools feel like, and you have a tool bag and everything else, and everything's tethered to you in case you drop anything. And then, it's you got to kind of feel your way to where the mound is, and then you can't really stick the hose right in it because you don't want to clog the hose. So you kind of have to start bringing in, you're just pulling it in toward the hose. And you got to make sure that you don't get your hand stuck to that hose either, because then, you get, so, which
For
is another
obvious
big
reasons.
danger in diving is what they, trying to remember the name for it. It's when two fluids of water have different pressures. And so what happens is, you're going from a lesser pressure to a higher pressure, is you're going to get sucked in. So that's another danger for divers, uh,
Hmm.
and not just getting stuck, getting your umbilical cord stuck or anything. It's getting sucked into things. So it
Wow.
again, it takes another kind of person sometimes to do this stuff, and
Okay, so you stayed in the field doing that type of work for 3 years, correct?
Right, right. So I did that for about 3 years. I did help some of the inspect techs on some of their jobs and learn some of the non-destructive testing stuff that they were doing. And what happened was I had an opportunity to go work for a aerospace subcontractor because I had some knowledge of non-destructive testing. And then so I went and did that. And as I did that, I decided I wanted to get certified in some of those disciplines because you have things that's called like a liquid penetrant, where it's a dye that can put on metal to see if there's a crack in a weld type of thing.
Okay.
Because you do that for welding, and that's why you do it in diving. Um, and then you do things like ultrasonic testing, where you can check inside if it's not a surface crack, it might be an inclusion inside. And then you have what's called eddy current, which a lot of times aerospace uses that to look for minute cracks underneath rivets. Um, so I found that there was a course at my local community college that I could take for a couple $100s, where
Wow.
these guys that went through the inspect course actually paid a lot more money for that. you know, so again, I got lucky and I did that. And because I got certified, I had another opportunity to go work for an inspection company, um, doing just non-destructive testing. And a lot of times that was in different like oil refineries and things like that. So, and what's interesting about that is you have level one, two, and three inspect certification levels. You start out as a level one or level two. You might get certified to level one or two, but you're only working as a level one because you have to do so many hours and then you have to take tests and so on and so forth. But those guys, when you become like a level three tech, you're making six figures,
Okay.
and so you can do that in the commercial dive industry if you work your way into doing what's called saturation diving. Um, or there's other routes. Like I said, it really opened up a lot of doors for me once I started realizing all the different types of trades that are connected to just the commercial diving.
Okay, so that's interesting. So your base that you had built with the commercial diving just had so many different facets that you were able to utilize those in different
Right,
manners and to do so many different things.
right.
Okay, so then lead us to where you moved from that point where you were just at.
From working for the inspection company.
Yes.
Well, from there, I kind of went into the entrepreneur route. Started a
Okay.
windshield repair business and did that. Wound up in the incorporation industry where I learned about business credit and finance, and I was teaching that. So it kind of,
Okay.
I went like way far away from the industry from there. But the things I learned, the disciplines I learned from the trade just translated into all that kind of stuff. So
Cool.
I've had a pretty good life with career and with finances and things just because I went through that commercial dive school. It actually did change my life. So
Awesome. Yeah. So this is incredibly fascinating because it's something we haven't spoken about before. So tell me a little bit about any pros and cons that you would like to mention specifically.
so the pros are, if you're someone that wants something different every day, you're looking to be challenged, you don't want to be bored. It's going to challenge you every single day. You have to be in good shape. You have to want to do it, even when there's days that you don't feel like doing it. I mean, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot like being in the military in some aspects where you actually have to feel the pain and do it anyway, kind of thing. Um, so if you're of that mindset, and danger doesn't, or I shouldn't say danger necessarily, risk. If you're risk adverse, or you're less inclined to have things hold you back because of risk, you'll probably do well in this industry. You also have to think. You have to really think things through and not just react, because you have to understand that if you're turning a knob and something to do with the air system, you want to know what you're turning on or off, because that could be someone's life support that you're turning on and off. You know,
Sure.
so losing your air is a big deal. I had that happen to me a couple times, but that was because somebody forgot to fill the generator with fuel. you know, Luckily, I wasn't that deep, and I had what's called a bailout bottle, which, if you're really deep, you're only having a few breaths of that. But when you're not that deep, you can be on a bail. It's like a scuba bottle, so you can be underwater since you're certified. You can be underwater for 30, 40 minutes, depending on how deep you are. So that wasn't that big of a deal. Um, but I was pretty pissed when I got out of the water. It's like, what the hell are you doing in there? Um, but things like that, you just have to really understand what you're doing, and pay attention to what you're doing, and because in this industry, mistakes can kill people. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine it sounds like incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
What's the camaraderie like amongst people? Because I imagine it's sort of like the military. You are relying on each other for your lives, correct?
Right, right. And that's a lot of reason why there's kind of a little bit of a hazing at first, because they want to weed people out. They really don't want people there that don't want to be there. And if they're going to be messing around, or if they're going to not think things through, if they can't handle stress, they want them out, you know.
Yeah.
But once you kind of get in, you're in, and like the military, there's a lot of good camaraderie, and then there could be some love-hate relationships as well. I had one guy, his dive school was 4 months and mine was 50 weeks. And so he kept asking me, well, what did you learn that I didn't learn? And he was always giving me crap about how long I went to school for, where he just went to school for 4 months. Why was I any better than him? You know,
Uh huh.
kind of thing. And so you're going to deal with that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
typical stuff that you're going to deal with. But, my rigging class was 2 weeks, where his is maybe one day or a couple hours. So for me, I figured the longer the school, the more skilled I'm going to be or more ready I'm going to be to, do the job. So,
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I think I
uh,
would be more comfortable doing something that dangerous with the most information possible, for
right.
sure.
So to answer your question about what the pros are, I mean, you can travel the world. Um, if you become a saturation diver, you're working maybe 4 or 5 months of the year, and then
Well,
because you're paid at such a high level, and you can only dive so much doing saturation, because you might be in a saturation situation for 30 days, you know, and so back when I was diving, the pay was around 1,000 a day. I'm not sure
Wow.
what it would be now. Um, but again, you're getting paid the premium for the riskiest job, you know. And so
Yeah.
if you're willing to go that level, you're going to get paid for that. So there's guys that they don't even live near where the company's at. They might live in a ranch in Montana, and then fly down for their job, and so the lifestyle can be very rewarding.
Yeah, I suppose that's an advantage for in some ways. If you're willing to accept the risks that are
Right.
involved in something that's that dangerous, you can reap some rewards as well.
Right.
Now, as far as gender goes, were you working with any women at the time, or are you aware that more and more women are becoming involved over time?
So when I was going through dive school, we did have a lady in our class. She came from the Navy. She had some dive experience and went through dive school. She wound up actually being one of the better divers in our class as far as working underwater and doing the projects and stuff. And a lot of the reason that is because us as men, we learn to just muscle everything, right? Well, underwater, water is an equalizer, right? You can't muscle things in order because you're just going to push yourself off the project, right? You have to learn
Uh,
leverage. And women learn leverage their whole life because they have to do things that they're not quite as strong for. So they got to learn other ways of doing things. And so learning leverage and understanding rigging helps a lot in that aspect. So we had a female diver in our class, and I know there were subsequent female divers. So there are some females in the industry. My hyperbaric teacher was female, and she came. I don't think she was in the Navy. She might have been in the Navy. I don't remember exactly what she did prior, but we had a female instructor for hyperbaric chamber. Um, so there are
cool.
females in the industry, probably more now than there was back then.
Sure, sure. As it is with so many trades at this point.
Right.
Well, that's interesting. Who would you think specifically would be best suited for something like this, other than the obvious, someone who's open to risk?
Um, yeah, it's just if you have a mindset of being adventurous and you like change every day and you like to be challenged and uh, new environments and stuff like that, if, if you go take a scuba class and you love it, you probably do well, so I would say, yeah.
Now, what would you say were other opportunities if you had continued in the field from where you had been? Obviously, you had mentioned underwater welding.
Mhm.
What are some of the other options?
So I'm part of the alumni group for our class, and so we get updates of who stayed in the industry, who did, and what they did. One guy has actually he's dove all over the world, and he's sent us videos and pictures when he was doing stuff in the Antarctic, in down Antarctica, doing stuff like that. I think he's working for a company called Oceanarian. That's a major company down there, um, and so that's the other thing too. You have to kind of pay attention to as far as the industry is. Some places are unionized, some places are. Here in California, it's unionized. Um, most other places it's not. So there's some different aspects of that here in the industry, but other than that, I mean, you're really open to what you want to do. So if, say, I wanted to continue with the hyperbaric stuff, I could have went into working in hyperbaric medicine in hospitals, you know, or work at a hyperbaric facility that treated, diving illnesses for scuba divers, things like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Um, I know some guys started their own uh, hall cleaning business where they would just go down to the local bay and clean the bottoms of boats for people. You know,
Oh, sure,
yeah.
sure.
So they got a little entrepreneur. They said, I don't want to work for somebody else, and they do that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things you can do uh, from this industry. Just really depends on what you want to do.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I suppose that's true. I mean, so few people really have those skills to be underwater and do that work that there are enough opportunities just go ahead and branch off into.
Right, exactly.
All right. Well, if someone out there is listening and they're interested in getting started in this, what would you suggest? How would you suggest that they go about that?
Well, I think nowadays Google's your friend. You can start Googling different schools. Back when I was doing it, there was no Google. This was pre-internet even.
Right. Right.
So I went through the VA handbook to see what schools I could get through the VA. Um, but yeah, I would just Google commercial dive school and find out what's closest to you. Start looking at what you're getting. They will try to make it sound like it's better than what it is, just because obviously they want to get you in and get you through the
Sure.
school. So just know that that will happen. Um, but if you do your due diligence, you can get into the right school. What's good for you? I know there's a school up in Washington State or Seattle that's 18 weeks that runs about $27,000. There's also a university because some people can do technical diving where you learn commercial diving, but for technical reasons and like underwater archaeology and things like that.
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure that you're going into the right school for the right reason. Um,
Okay. Okay, yeah,
yeah,
that's great information.
right.
As a side note, you and I were talking briefly before the interview. We mentioned AI, artificial intelligence, and
Hmm.
how it can affect things. There are always concerns about, with certain trades, is it going to affect it? Can you see AI affecting the amount of work that someone could get or the future of your trade?
Yeah, I think that AI will enhance certain things, like we talked about ROVs, underwater rovers that go down. They're not going to replace a human hand anytime soon. So unless they can have that type of dexterity, they're still only used for inspection and certain types of applications. They can go down and yeah, they might be able to cap off a well or something like that. But for there's a lot of things that you still need a human to get their hands on and do because otherwise they would already replace them. you know the I could see AI maybe taking over controlling those ROVs, but
Sure.
and as far as like even in an inspection, I honestly I don't see that maybe enhancing it right now, but not necessarily replacing. I think they're a lot further off than a lot of things are. I think AI is being talked about a lot, but I think some of it's overhyped as well. I don't think it's as far along as people believe it. And I'm not being conspiracy or anything. I'm just thinking about it rationally. These systems were built on language models, and so they interpret based on what they expect you to say next. And so that's where a lot of this intelligence seems like it's coming from, but they just don't know, you know. And there's still a lot of work to be done in AI. Yeah, there's some cool apps right now, and you can do a lot of stuff on the internet and make cool pictures and that kind of thing. But I
Yeah.
think we're really far off from actually replacing people in a trade like uh, construction, because basically underwater, diver is underwater construction. So
Sure, yeah. We've addressed that many times. I'm glad you mentioned this, and I'm glad we touched base on that
yeah,
because, as certainly everyone I talk to is like, no, 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 that AI is not going to have any effect on any of these trades at this point. We're not near there
right,
yet, so these are great opportunities.
right.
That's awesome information. Thank you so much, brother. Is there anything you'd like to plug while you're here? Feel free to shout out anyone or anything
Um,
you'd like to.
Not really. Just because now I'm medically retired from the military, and because I was stayed in the National Guard while I was still doing all this stuff, and so um, I just raising kids and living my life. So I'm not really doing anything entrepreneur wise or anything other than just more of a hobby stuff. So yeah,
Cool. Well, that sounds like a pretty good gig you got set up then.
yeah, definitely.
Erik, thanks so much for being here, man.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you.
We'll see you next time, folks. Check out jointhetrades.com.